Welcome everyone to OA Week 2025. We will wait just 1 minute to get started to give folks a chance to join the webinar. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for OA Week 2025. My name is Courtney Witkowski and I'm a GOA-ON Secretariat member. Please note that this session is being recorded. OA Week is presented by 4 sponsoring organizations. First, GOA-ON, the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. Second, NOAA, the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Third, the IAEA OAICC, the International Atomic Energy Agency Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center. And last but not least, the IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. GOA-ON was established in 2012 with just a handful of members. Since then, GOA-ON has grown immensely. We now have over 1,200 members from over 110 countries. GOA-ON has 11 regional hubs, which span across continents and oceanographic regions, and we'll be hearing from most of those hubs throughout OA Week. If you are not a member yet, you can join GOA-ON today by visiting our website, GOA-ON.org. OA Week debuted in 2020 and returned in 2021 when events and conferences were postponed due to COVID-19. Following the successful in-person symposium on the ocean in a high CO2 world in 2022, OA Week has become an annual event to maintain momentum around OA research and provide a virtual platform for the ocean acidification community to exchange their latest findings. We're thrilled to present a wide range of ocean acidification topics and speakers from around the world. A few notes on housekeeping. During the session today, all participants are in listen-only mode. You are welcome to type any questions you have throughout the session into the questions box, which can be found at the bottom of the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be monitoring incoming questions and directing them to the speakers at the end of the session. And during our discussion period, you can also use the raise hand function in the toolbox to be called on to ask a question live. And with that, I would like to introduce you to your moderator for this session, Edith Mari from the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, also known as the OA Alliance. Edith Mari is a science communicator who specializes in synthesizing research to make ocean climate science accessible and captivating to policymakers. They help guide the strategic direction of the OA Alliance by implementing the organization's core programs. They have been heavily involved in designing an interactive tool for exploring the OARS framework to action with the support of the OARS Secretariat and working groups. And Edie, with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and to our audience for tuning in around the globe. The session is titled OARS Framework for Action, an introduction to co-designing ocean acidification research for decision-making under the UN Decade of Ocean Science. In order to encourage a diversity of OA actions across different scales, OARS has developed a framework for co-designing OA information for action. The framework identifies categories that guide various user groups in navigating the best opportunities to harness linkages between climate ocean change, science, and policy priorities. Let's begin with our first speaker, who's going to tell us a bit about the OARS program and its history and desired outcomes under the UN Decade of Ocean Science. Dr. Jan Newton is a senior principal oceanographer with the Applied Physics Laboratory at the University of Washington and an affiliate professor in the College of the Environment. She is the Executive Director of the Northwest Association of Networked Ocean Observing Systems, NANOOS, the U.S. IOOS Regional Association for the Pacific Northwest. She's a co-director of the Washington Ocean Acidification Center and the co-chair of GOA-ON. She also co-leads OARS with Kirsten Usensi and Steve Whitcomb. Jan is a biological oceanographer who has studied the physical, chemical, and biological dynamics of Puget Sound and coastal Washington, including understanding effects from climate and humans on water properties. Jan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Edie. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to talk to you all about kicking off this OARS session, and just to provide a little bit of context with how and why OARS started. So as you all know, the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development began 2021 and runs till 2030. And in response to that, GOA-ON wanted to put forward a program. So they proposed to the UN on behalf of our ocean acidification community, OARS, with a vision to have a connected, multi-sectoral community of experts and professionals that deliver knowledge and actions required to mitigate, manage, and adapt to the impacts of OA. And in June 2021, the UN Decade endorsed OARS as a program. Now, next, if you'll click one more. One thing I want to note is that we are halfway there. We're in 2025, so we're halfway through the decade. So attention to what we've accomplished in OARS and where we need to go is really critical. Next slide. So here's a beautiful quote from Peter Thompson, the United Nations Secretary General, Special Envoy for the Ocean. He said, the OARS program offers a vision of how we can develop and utilize scientific evidence to provide societally relevant future predictions, raise public awareness of ocean acidification, and shape effective policy. And this was a really pivotal moment for OARS because as GOA-ON, we're really a bottom-up, GOA-ON was built by scientists, and it's a networking organization that helps us stay connected, share capacity, and better do what we all need to do. OARS elevates that to a very visible realm with policymakers and on the UN stage. Next slide. So as OARS was envisioned, we have 7 outcomes, and they're abbreviated here. You can see they're interrelated, but to produce quality data, to make sure that science is available for action, to co-design observing strategies, to understand biological impacts, to make future projections, to increase public awareness. We talk about ocean literacy. We also need ocean acidification literacy. And then to engage with policymakers. And this is not meant to be linear. They're all interconnected, and they're all being worked on simultaneously. In order to make this happen, OARS engaged the energy and wisdom and insight of co-champions for each of these. We started that 5 years ago. In some cases, those co-champions have turned over. We have new co-champions passing the baton. And those co-champions have rallied a working group to help lay out the vision. And so if we can go to the next slide. In white papers that outline the community's vision for achieving our outcomes and supporting the Sustainable Development Goal 14.3 to minimize and address impacts of OA. And that really requires enhanced cooperation at all levels. And so I really encourage you to look at this white paper, the collection of white papers for OARS that really outlines the vision. But it's not just about having a vision, it's about moving forward. And that's the phase that we're in now. We're really implementing that vision. We're working together. If you aren't already involved in OARS, I encourage you to go to the website and use this cool little code here and reach out to the Secretariat for the sector that you're interested in. You can join more than one outcomes if you're so motivated, but we really need your help to make sure that we're pushing this forward, all hands on deck, so to speak. Next slide. So as we think about the future and the fact that we're halfway through, we also need to think about, we don't want 2030 to happen and OARS just goes away, right? How will we sustain the activities and create a pathway for working on these within communities of practice? So here what I have are the 3 goals of GO-ON to get observations from a variety of ecosystems around the world on the status of OA, to understand its impacts on biological organisms and communities, and to provide and gather the data necessary for projections, modeling, decision-making tools. Okay, if you'll click once more, it's pretty straightforward that these OARS outcomes nest within these goals. So as we are working on the OARS outcomes, they're really going to support those GO-ON goals and to continue the community that's there. And if you'll click once more, these are additional OARS outcomes that have societal connections, or to, they all have societal connections, right? So OARS 2 is that science to action, 7 is taking that to policymakers, and OARS 6 is the ocean literacy. And so if you'll click one more time, what we've decided at this stage of the game, halfway in, is that these 3 working groups will, outcome working groups will connect together. So it really makes sense at this point to pull them together because they're highly related, and see how we can move forward. And a big part of that is what you heard introduced, the website. If you'll click one last time. It's sort of disrespectful just to even call this a website. It's an interactive tool. It's a framework. It's an amazing thing that Edie will demonstrate for you right now. But it allows us to put examples of science to action. It allows us to create awareness. It allows decision makers and others an on-ramp to figure out, how do I get information? What do I do with the information? And it's a fantastic tool. So it's really been my pleasure to give you this overview of OARS, and I leave you now in the hands of Edie and the panelists. And unfortunately, I need to go step onto a research vessel because my students have their cruise today. So I leave you now, but thanks so much for listening. I encourage you to be a part of OARS, and the best to the panel and the rest of this session. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Jan, and bon voyage.
Merci beaucoup.
All right, so as you briefly heard, the OARS website has recently undergone a transformation that reflects the incredible work done by the working groups for the 7 OARS outcomes over the past 5 years. In particular, the working group for OARS Outcome 2 was charged with helping to identify data and evidence for specific mitigation and adaptation outcomes. To do so, the working group realized it was important to open up a conversation about the different decision-making categories for specific actions that OA data and evidence can help to inform. We worked for about 2 years, first through the development of a white paper to decide on these different decision-making categories. From there, we tried to figure out how to best categorize how or why OA information would be useful to each category. Finally, to ensure that we were reaching outside of the OA science community, we decided to build a dynamic web page to help bring in different actors, specifically policymakers and other non-government stakeholders, to help them understand how OA science can help support their outcomes, and inversely, to help the OA science community ask the right questions to identify the most impactful research needs. In the process of considering how to identify data and evidence needs, it became apparent that there are at least 3 types of user groups who interact with OA data. You have the OARS scientific community, comprising a network of researchers who produce the data, evidence, and information that's the foundation of any management, mitigation, or adaptation strategy. Next, you have the policymakers and marine resource managers who collaborate to identify and prioritize gaps in knowledge that inform those local intervention strategies. You also have communities of stakeholders who work together to monitor and respond to the threat of OA and the mounting climate emergency. So you've got the folks who produce the OA information, and you've got the folks who need the OA information in order to take action. OARS believes that OA information produced in a targeted way is essential to helping those user groups, the policymakers, resource managers, stakeholders, and local communities, better understand the impacts of OA on marine resources. Enhanced understandings of these impacts helps user groups co-identify the most appropriate mitigation or adaptation actions to minimize and address the effect of OA. So the question becomes, how can the OARS community of researchers provide these user groups with a more complete picture of local drivers, conditions, risks, and solutions? This is a tough question to answer if your target audience doesn't know what they don't know. So the first step is to help potential users of OA knowledge identify the type of decision they are considering making. Once we know what category that decision falls under, we can identify ways that OA information might support mitigation and adaptation actions related to that decision. To this end, OARS has outlined 6 key decision-making categories. These categories provide a framework for identifying targeted or increased OA information needs for mitigation and adaptation actions. Let's take a brief tour of these 6 categories through the OARS user guide. Here we have descriptions that help decision makers determine if their decision falls under the umbrella of impacts of CO2 emissions on human and ocean health and resources, food security and resilience of seafood economies, best applications of marine management tools, reduction of land-based pollution, nature-based coastal solutions, and marine carbon dioxide removal. There are specific ways in which OA information might support actions within each category. These examples here are from an infographic produced by the Working Group for Outcome 2. Yeah. These are the first 3, and then the next slide, the second 3. What started as a table at the end of a white paper has evolved into a framework for action with an interactive user guide. In this section of the user guide, OARS provides a more detailed description of the types of OA research activities that can serve the needs for specific actions in mitigation, adaptation, and restoration. Determining which research activities best serve specific decisions is not something a policymaker or stakeholder can or should be expected to do. This is where it becomes essential to engage in equitable co-design with motivated stakeholders and end users. To do so, we must identify supply and demand pathways associated with OA information in each category. By showing the type of activities and research that OARS scientists can provide, and by helping to contextualize or make more obvious the ways in which OA research applies to different decision-making outcomes, we help user groups articulate which science best supports their projects. We must work to break down barriers in communication by connecting non-science practitioners with OARS researchers. Scientists must understand the significance of applying the framework when describing your projects in science in order to build access points or communication bridges with policymakers and other stakeholders. Remember, the role of OARS and the OARS community is to inform and connect. To help us think about the ways in which the framework can be applied to existing OA research projects and to explore the co-design process within the framework, we're joined by 2 OARS Working Group co-champions. Dr. Sam Dupont is an associate professor and senior lecturer at the University of Göteborg in Sweden. His research focuses on the effect of global changes on marine ecosystems and the biological impacts of ocean acidification. His work includes the evaluation and capacity building for marine science in developing countries, particularly in South America, and through the Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, the OAICC, and GOA-ON. Next, Dr. Punyashlok Buttery is the Professor of Biological Sciences in the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Kolkata. He has published more than 80 peer-reviewed papers in international journals. His research interests include biocomplexity of microbial systems, including in mangroves, biogeochemical cycling and sea level rise, nature-based solutions to ecosystem restoration, and developing technologies for biomonitoring of coastal biotopes. Thank you for joining us today. All right, so this question is for the both of you. Of the decision-making categories, which are the most applicable to your work? All right, Sam, I'm looking for you guys on my
Yeah,
screen.
sure. I think I saw that PV was
Yeah.
turning his
Thank you.
microphone on, so I thought he might start. So thank you, Edith, and nice to be here, everybody. So that's in a way a complicated question because I would say all of them. That's a little bit because being a marine biologist, I think biology is needed at every step. And there is none of these categories that actually not biologically related. Sometimes it's a shortcut that is taken by many policymakers, like because there's still an old ecotoxical way of thinking where you basically measure something, you do monitoring, and then you put a threshold somewhere, and then you take decisions. But in the case of acidification, biology is really critical to actually make the bridge between the chemistry and the biology. So that's why I think it's really nice that we have a specific OARS goal completely related to biology, and that's also the same for the goal for OARS. But sometimes it's more important than other. For sure, impacts, seafood security, very important, and also the multiple stressor aspect. When it comes to the nature-based solution and the MCDR, I would say like it's more about evaluating the safety of implementation. Sometimes it's about efficiency, of course, but it's also about safety. Are we okay as a community to recommend some of these actions, knowingly that we know very little about what the side effects could be? So that would be my not really satisfying answer.
That was great. Thank you. Punishna?
Yep. Thank you so much, Edith and colleagues. I think I agree with Sam points. I'll just add to that. When you have almost 30% of the global population living along the coastline, it's equally important to think about the food security and the livelihood. And I think the OARS framework for action very rightly connects these important goals which you've highlighted. And therefore, it's like a building block. Once we address these components, the entire building will stand together. Otherwise, everything will fall apart. So I think we all are collectively in different ways or capacities trying to address those points by addressing those goals, which can range from, as Sam has pointed out very rightly, from understanding the core biology, the carbon chemistry of the ocean, and ultimately linking it to the sustainability and livelihood. And for example, in many small island countries, developing states, economy is very, very important, the blue economy. So I think it's an integral network that's very, very critical to understand. Yeah.
No, that's a great point. Thinking about that, are we doing enough to incorporate broader environmental, social, and economic aspects into OA research? And do you feel like how can the co-design process inform the answer to that question?
Since your work starting, continue, PB, I'll take over after.
Yep. Thanks, Sam. So I think this is a very important question. Frankly speaking, I've asked a question for which there is no straight-cut answer, if I may say so. But I think you have to take a regional perspective to address some of these social, economic, and other things. You can't have a straight-cut framework where everything will fall apart, will fall into place rather. And that's what OARS has been trying to do. Setting these goals also has taken into account all these local, regional, and of course the global factors. We must not forget one thing. For example, the policymakers who work, or the policymakers that we want to work or we are working with, we need to understand their pulses, because we come up with ways and implementations we advise to them, but it's them who take it down either through a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach that will bring positive influences on the communities. And in a changing world, with a changing climate and many of these factors, including OA, I think the pace at which things are happening, that needs to accelerate to meet up to the expectations of the global coastal communities.
Yeah, so for my answer to that, and maybe a little bit of the answer to the first question, I would say it's, for me, my involvement in OARS comes from a strong frustration that the body of scientific literature is quite big. I think we have really clear science, we understand really well, but the level of actions is quite low still. I think we don't really see the actions happening at the level that we need. So when we think about the decision-making categories, it's really important, but that will, of course, depend on where you are. I think every country, every region will have a different sense of priorities. And what is required today is not necessarily incorporating different actors. It's more change the way we think about science to be sure that we deliver what is needed for the different actors. So I'm currently in Iceland. It's my first day here. And that's what the exercise we're going to try to do now. So we're basically going to go and talk to all the key actors, put them in the same room, like political parties from different, flavors, fishermen, and so on, and basically listen. I think that's basically the paradigm shift. Scientists needs to listen first. We've done the talking. We put like a acidification on the agenda. Now it's time to listen and say, okay, what can be done locally? What are the decision-making categories that you think are the most important for you? And then from there, it will be quite obvious who are the people that we need to work with. I think it's not about incorporating everybody everywhere. It's about putting the right person in the room to address the right problem. And then from that will come, okay, this is what we can do. This is the problem we have. This is the solution that we have in mind. And it doesn't work now because we are missing this critical piece of information. And that's where we go back to the scientists. And it could be natural scientists, social scientists, whatever, and making them, okay, you do your job now, and this is the data that are lacking to basically implement the solution. So that's what is really exciting about OARS. That's what is really exciting about this framework is in a way canalizing the energy that we have all around in the right direction and putting the right persons in the room to really do science that matters.
That is beautifully said. Thank you for that. That is exactly what we hope you will do with the framework. Kunyosof, I'm wondering if you have any lessons from your regions that wondering how we can leverage lessons learned at the local scale across regional projects. Is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, I think rather than giving an example, I put it in this way that the one of the most critical aspects, the important aspects of these learning experiences for all the stakeholders, or rather I'd say if we look at the stakeholders from the government side or from the community side, that we understand now that, as Sam has very rightly said, that the science is strong, it has been put into the global context. We know the problem, but where can we find the money to solve this problem? And I think that's where really it's going to be very, very important, and we need to understand and hear because unless and until we are able to leverage that fund that can help us to address this critical issue of the OA and the communities and all the 6 points that you've highlighted, we'll not be able to understand that. And obviously, at a local scale, that the approach is different. And I'll just take 30 seconds on this to highlight that we must not forget that democracy is usually in most part of the world run for 4 to 5 years. So a government comes down and they would like to frame something, but the priority is also to ensure that they can return. And that's where one of the biggest challenges of the democracy is, that how do you ensure that they look it beyond 4 years or beyond 5 years and look it at a scale which would be very, very important for that would bring a positive implications for the local or communities or at the local or regional scale. And I think once those changes are happening, I mean, if you look in Philippines or, for example, in Sri Lanka as two small island countries, I would say, where these changes are happening, I think there's a lot of lesson to learn from there, that how local approaches can be very, very crucial and bringing the fund and making it more meaningful for the communities. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can also give an example maybe from what we've been doing in Sweden, and the challenge is overwhelming. So we basically have acidification, which is this global issue with local perspective, and we have ideas of, we kind of know what needs to be done. We need to mitigate, we need to, reduce carbon dioxide emission or capture carbon. We need to basically locally adapt. But if we want to be actionable, we need to be reasonable in a way. So see what kind of tools are there around, and what can, and then you can choose your fight in a way. Well, what can I contribute to in that array of different things? And when I took that challenge back home in Sweden, I realized like, okay, mitigation, reduction of carbon dioxide is complicated, and adaptation too. We need public support. So that was kind of my thinking. We need a better understanding and a better public support. And that's how we ended up doing some science communication. And we did that by collaborating with all the different actors, so the public, the social scientists, the psychologists, and so on. We made an investigation and realized if we really want to make a difference there, we need to do science on things that people care about. And that's what we did. We basically started investigating the impact of acidification on seafood, communicated that in a dynamic way, and then providing them recommendation. And one of the recommendation is vote for the right people that are actually fighting for your cause. So that's basically half of, if you want to drive policy changes, you need, of course, to convince the policymakers, and that's out of my expertise, but you also need to convince the people so that they will accept the changes to come and also put pressure to actually have these changes. So that's an example of, I chose my fight. Personally, like in my group, we decided we're going to do the science that will potentially, hopefully, have an impact on people, so they will actually take themselves the right decision to support the right policy, which is ocean literacy in a nutshell. They get information, they know what the right things to do it, and after that, of course, is their decision. But from the research we've been doing, it seems that it is working. We can actually increase the willingness to change and also the acceptance of the changes to come.
Thank you for that. Are there any current management or policy mechanisms that we need to take up to incorporate this work? Like, how can OARS work to facilitate this more?
I can start this time. I think what we need at this stage, I think you guys made a fantastic job, I think, with this framework, but it's very general still in a way, and it's maybe a little bit difficult to chew for some people. And what you started to do that is actually really good is success stories. And I think we need more of those. And there are some people that are ready to take the step of actually implementing the framework and getting the support that they need from their country, from their policymakers. And you're going to sell that not with a nice website. I think that's going to be like the tool later. It's going to be like stories. Like, okay, it worked there. It made a difference really for the people locally, regionally, or even nationally, globally. But the more success stories we're going to get, the more convincing the framework will be. Because that's basically, again, coming back to Iceland, where I am this week, is there is a willingness from the policymaker to do the right thing. There is a willingness from the scientists to produce the right data. So everybody is kind of in that state. What they miss is kind of, how do we do this? And we're going to use the framework. We're going to try to do it. Okay, let's see what are the problems, what are the potential solutions, what kind of categories, where policy intervene, what kind of the lack. But basically, I really like what Iceland just I mean, I had conversation today, and they said the world is going in the wrong direction today. I think I don't have to tell you that. It's complicated. We have like changes in politics everywhere that are scary. What Iceland want to do is to be a light in the darkness. So that's basically by doing the right thing, be an inspiration when the world will come back to their sense, hopefully. But basically, that's the idea. And this framework that we work on, that we try to implement, can be instrumental in actually finding what the right thing to do is. So I'm hopeful. I think we have to be hopeful. We have a nice tool. We have a nice community with all the people who actually make the effort to come today, and all the other people. I think that's great. I think it's inspiring to see, and let's try to have more of these success stories.
What do you think?
Yeah, just to add to what Sam said. Absolutely, yes. I think we need more success stories. I think more these success stories should strengthen more south to south cooperation and south to north cooperation. I think that's something which is also very, very important. I think the momentum has to come, and one of the verticals for would be the success stories. And any regional story or a local story of success can be a learning experience for another region or for another part of the world. I think there's nothing like we cannot learn from each other, and OARS is an example where we are learning from each other, where all the stakeholders have come together. So that's something is going to be extremely important. I think also we we tend to look at where policy frameworks from a not on which can join these dots with the global frameworks, and that's going to be very, very critical. I think these 6 points which are highlighted very nicely in this website, along with and as this gets populated with many success stories, I think those regional framework will connect very strongly with the global frameworks. So I think and have to learn along the way. But I think as very rightly we say, keep on saying that the time is short, so we have to accelerate also. But steady acceleration is very critical. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I think I wanted to sort of sit with the acknowledgement that the willingness is there from all parties, and that it's really just about finding what the right thing to do is for your particular context. And this framework offers the first step toward that. Yeah, just a reminder that the charge of OARS right now really is to inform and to connect. And so I'm really glad to hear that this feels like it taps into larger frameworks and into larger policy mechanisms. And it's an incredible thing that the OARS community has put together, sort of filtered from all the years of everyone working individually in these silos and bubbles, and then looking up and saying, okay, let's do this together now. How do we move forward? I love the idea too of Iceland being a beacon. I think we should all take that on, right? Let's be the beacon for as the world comes back to its senses. Thank you so much for this thoughtful conversation. I'm really grateful that you joined us today. Next, Jessie Turner is going to give us a glimpse at the future of the OARS framework for action.
Well, thank you so much, Edie, and everyone for being here. I was going to do a little synthesis, but you perfectly just summed it. It was a great conversation, and so I'm equally as pleased for the conversation that just framed up sort of what we were hoping this to be, a tool, not an outcome in and of itself, of the OARS program, this framework for action. My only little recap, I really love Sam. This is a global issue, but with local perspectives. We talk about global issue, local action, but I really like the idea of local perspectives as well. And so that's a great way to think about this as we move forward, and just generally our thinking about acidification for purpose and how we message that. So all to say, you guys have heard about the OARS program. I'm just going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes and tell you a little bit about where this particular working group around the framework is going, and to invite you all to join us. This is just a quick picture from the UN Ocean Conference, which occurred in June of this year. And there's Jan and many others that you've seen on screen and also in your networks sharing out the OARS program to at an event there in Nice. Next slide. So what's next? So we've decided just a little bit, as Jan mentioned at the top of this call, you can go to the next slide. OARS started the first 5 years, with 7 different outcomes, and therefore 7 different working groups around these different outcomes. And Jan went through those outcomes at the beginning of this call, so I won't reiterate them. And she suggested that now that we're at the halfway point and we've put together this framework and we've got this, just as she said, more than a website, something more, what do we do now to really make the most of our last 5 years under the UN Decade of Ocean Science as a program, but also set us up for success beyond? So one of our first steps in that thinking is to combine these working groups, the numbers 2, 6, and 7. So that has been the OA information, identifying OA information for mitigation and adaptation. That was OARS 2, which was the driver behind this framework at the beginning. Number 6 has been about ocean literacy, ocean acidification literacy, and communications. And then outcome 7 has been about the policy engagement. And so we've decided to combine those partners, I would say, into one we'll call a super group, focusing on the framework, which will meet quarterly, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to do together. As Jan mentioned, the other working groups under OARS, we're having a little bit more creative. Those are a little bit more on the science kind of applied conversations. And so we want to make sure that those are in at least dialogue with GO-ON working groups where there are overlap, explore opportunities to collaborate. And then, of course, ensure there's feedback loop between the work that's continuing to happen under those working groups back to this larger framework working group. And that's sort of what our goal will be over the next year as a try-on, and then we'll see what other little fine-tuning needs to be made. So next slide. So at this sort of super group, if you will, the decision-making framework, we're going to meet quarterly. And just as this conversation alluded to, we want to be focused not just on the promotion. I feel like a lot of times you sort of get pigeonholed into like, go to an event, go to a conference, talk about OARS, and that's it. And while that's really important, at early stages of initiative startup or content startup, you do need to be visible. You need to be out there just promoting the thing and getting your logo on people's screens. And I feel like the OARS leadership did a really super great job doing that over the last 5 years. But now we want to do something that's a little bit of that with a little bit more depth. We do want to basically implement and take up all the pieces of the conversation that PB and Sam and Edie just beautifully articulated. So how do we think about getting more public support? How does OARS framework support us in doing that? How do we think about more government engagement? How do we think about the funding pieces relevant to the OA work that needs to be happening? PB, you articulated, and you always do so well, that it's not just about funding for one specific project, that 2-year, 3-year project at a time. We really need to help the conversation along and thinking about what is the ongoing investment in this work regionally that's going to help articulate all those other decision-making categories, over time. And so usually that's not going to be one grant for one project. We still need those in really discrete ways. But how do we think about engaging larger regional bodies like UN Environment Program or development banks, or climate financing groups to really be thinking about why investment in ocean acidification baseline development and research at a regional level will help governments engage in all those different decision-making categories a little bit more comprehensively with acidification information in their back pocket. So that's sort of one of the things that we want to be thinking about bringing in. And then, of course, as Sam mentioned, stories, success stories, case studies, implementing some of these categories and showing projects that articulate why we're suggesting that OA information will be relevant to doing something more specific in that category. And so that's really what the work is in front of us. So it is soliciting case studies, it is promoting the framework, but it's also really developing those best practices and communicating it. And as Edie's been saying really beautifully, and I think Jan has articulated it well too, how do we use this as a shared language? Just we are at a different place in the field of OA science and research now than when OA Week started in 2020, and certainly when, many of you began research on ocean acidification 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so how do we start bringing the OA science community along into thinking about applying or utilizing this framework and this lens that really is meant to be a filter for thinking about how we get the right people talking to each other for the right outcomes, just as was said. So that's the work in front of us. Our first call is going to be on the 23rd of October. So that's in, I think, a week's time. We're going to have 2 different call options because we do recognize that we want to make sure different time zones are accommodated in a more meaningful way. So we'll have a call for my time in DC a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, and hopefully we'll have different opportunities for our colleagues around the world to join us. Next slide. And again, our October agenda, we'll probably do an hour and a half, I think is what we've set aside. We'll talk a little bit about applying the framework when describing your projects and sort of the science that you're working on and how we think about using this to shape how you're describing the work's relevance. But again, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So to some extent, we want to think about what tools do we all need as an OARS community to be going and then out into the world and engaging others. And so to some extent, that's a little bit of what do you need from us to do that well, and sort of what are the expectations that we would have for our working group members to be out and go be engagers in the way that Sam and PB have talked about in their own projects. We want you all to be able to take that work up as well and have a process for inputting your learnings and your insights back to us as we go. We also want to talk about, of course, exploring opportunities for promoting this at the big events. So, of course, you know, the climate COP coming up. I think the Ocean Science meeting in 2026 in Glasgow will be a place where the OARS community and the GOA-ON community will really be having lots of events that we can tie that OARS framework into. And then we also want to be thinking about the end of the year Ocean and High CO2 Symposium that will be coming up in New Zealand, another great opportunity for engaging there. In December, we'll have one more meeting and we'll probably think about our draft work plan for 2026. And again, I want to force myself to get away from just events and conferences and a lot more into the uptake of this framework by all of us in the OARS community, going out into a different set of actors, those stakeholders that Edie mentioned at the beginning, and doing some real work to embed and take back learnings and insights as we fine tune this over time. Next slide. And I think it's just a big thank you. I mean, here as a group of OARS members at the UN Decade of Ocean Science meeting that happened in 2024, it's easy to think that we sit on a lot of Zoom calls and we look at a lot of work plans together and we edit the same paragraph over and over. And are we really making any progress? And I would just like to reiterate the appreciation, but also the amazing work that this OARS community has advanced over the last 5 years to bring us to something like the lens of a framework. Again, that really is just a filtering tool for helping us communicate our work to a broader audience and also to get that right co-design process as we think about the future of the field of OA research into the next 5, 10, 15 years. So no small undertaking, and it's been quite democratic and quite inclusive, and I've been very proud of being part of OARS. Edie, anything that you want to add for the good of the order on the working groups? You've been quite involved, not just in creating the framework in the background, but also helping us think through the structure of how we merge these things and bring the right people together for the conversation ahead. Anything you want to add on our supergroup going into October and next year?
No, I'm glad that you brought up that it has been a highly democratic process, and there is room for every voice in the room. And so anyone who's interested, we're looking to expand the community. We're looking to have our work really reflect what's happening out in the field and help create those bridges in a very supportive way. So I hope folks come. I also wanted to point out very quickly, we blew through your introduction. Jessie Turner is co-champion for OARS Outcomes 7 and 2, and has been very much shepherding this process over the past couple of years, and is also the executive director of the OA Alliance, has been since 2016, where she establishes partnerships across a variety of disciplines and coalitions to support Alliance members in the development of practicable ocean acidification adaptation and resilience strategies. So thank you for being here with us today. We have potentially some questions that might need answering from the audience. I think Courtney will help us out with that. And then we'd love to close with a little celebratory video as well.
Sure. Jessie, if you would like to share your screen to pull up that video, we can go ahead and get that queued up. We do have some time, no questions from the audience yet, but if anyone would like to put one in the Q&A box, you can do so, or you can raise your hand and we can call on you after the video is played. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll take a tiny bit of privilege then with the introduction from the OA Alliance side. I would just say if you want to join this new framework working group, please, we can put Edie's email in the chat, I think, or my email, either way. And we love for you guys to join us. So if you're not already, it is open invitation. And I know that Sam and PB will be with us there as well. So it'll be a nice journey into the future together. Just to queue up a little bit of context for this video. So the OA Alliance has been working a little bit more on our creative communications over the last year and a half. And one of, everyone wants a video. And of course, so we thought, okay, let's do a video. But we really wanted to be a little bit more clear about what we were trying to relay. And of course, there's the awareness around acidification. What is it and why it's a problem? But really what I think has moved us as individuals over the last several years being involved in this work, it's really the people that we all work with and the amazing scientists that are going out in the field every single day, taking that one bottle sample and building that baseline and really wanting to show that work, but also to contextualize it as to why it matters and kind of what the stakes are at a global equity issues around ocean acidification and the work on the policy and research policy and investment side that needs to be expanded. So we've created this short video. It's called Changing Waters, Time for Action on Ocean Acidification. The full film is about 15 minutes long and was filmed in Washington State, in Colombia, in Santa Marta, as well as Fiji. The full film will be shown at COP30 or coming out this November, but we have a short little teaser here. That's the 4.5-minute version that we wanted to share with you all just to sort of I guess, take advantage of the opportunity to do a little bit of film premiere and then hopefully share the final film once it's out with everybody in this community. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Yes, I'm sorry it is that crazy. And let me know if the sound is coming through or if anything is the issue, just so you let me know.
No sound. No sound.
No sound. That could be a problem. We promise we won't troubleshoot too much. If it doesn't work, we'll let you go. Let me think about my audio settings really quick. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll try it one more time. If it doesn't work, I will be sad, but we will accept that. Let's see.
Lives here in the Bay on the Macau Reservation.
Yeah, that came through.
That was
if
good,
you want to
Jesse.
restart it.
That was working? Okay.
Yes.
All right, we'll go through all the way again.
I've lived here in the Bay on the Macau Reservation my whole life. The ocean is so important to us because it's something we've depended on since the beginning of time.
Shellfish aquaculture around here is absolutely critical. 15 years ago, our oyster larvae all started to die. That water we were sucking in from the ocean is some of the most corrosive water they've measured anywhere in the ocean.
A member of the Quinault Nation spoke about how he used to harvest razor clams, grabbing them. Nowadays, the shell will break.
The community there alerted us to something that until that point had been an academic science to become an applied science that needed urgent attention.
Oh, by the way, if you can convince the world to stop burning fossil fuels today, all that bad water is still coming our way.
Washington State has really been referred to as a canary in the coal mine when it comes to thinking about ocean acidification.
It makes me concerned for what it's going to look like for 3, 4, or 5 generations down the road. And where do you sit and where is your identity as a tribe? I think it's important that Macau has a seat at the table.
Washington State brought together the right people and really created the first in the world OA action plan.
Obviously, not every government in the world is going to have those resources and ability to respond.
70% of all ocean acidification knowledge currently comes for and by United States, Canada, UK, Europe.
Y esa inequidad se traduce en pobreza, vulnerabilidad y limitaciones para crecer, para desarrollarse, para tener una vida digna.
Necesitamos más recursos para poder generar esa información que se requiere.
Hay lugares que aún en América Latina y el Caribe no han hecho una sola medición de cuál es el sistema de carbonato de sus aguas, ¿verdad?
los países de América Latina y el Caribe, 18 países, lo que estamos haciendo es tratar de entender el problema no desde cada uno de los países. Esto no es un problema regional ni es un problema de Colombia, es un problema global.
Tenemos un grupo de WhatsApp, nos dicen, hey, mi equipo está fallando, me está pasando esto, a ti te ha pasado. Y lo que nos enorgullece es que hoy en día hay más investigadores por país trabajando en esto.
Even if it seems like a daunting problem, every bit of progress we make matters. En lo personal me preocupa, pero también es una preocupación responsable. La obligación desde la ciencia de entender cuáles van a ser los impactos y de proponer soluciones.
I really enjoy the policy work. It's exciting to be able to make a difference, but I really miss growing shellfish. So I started my own farm. It reminds me of why I do the policy work. It grounds me. When I go out and work hard on my farm, I can look back and say, oh, look, we harvested 10,000 pounds of clams today, and my body's sore and I hurt, but it's really gratifying because I can see I got something done.
It means a lot to me to be able to pass to my kids what it means to be Macan and what it means to not only harvest resources, but to do it in a manner that's consistent with our traditional core values.
All right, well, I'll stop sharing my screen. I apologize for buffering issues or sound. There's swelling, beautiful music that tugs at the heartstrings, but we hopefully, there's a link in the chat for the full, the short film teaser that's on our YouTube channel, and we really look forward to sharing the final film with all of you. Like I said, obviously this film isn't really about OARS explicitly, but we hope that the spirit is there of the larger ocean acidification community of action, which all of us are part of. So really excited to share it with everybody and continue to use it as a tool as we share this framework out, but also continue to be part of this emerging discussion of the field and future of OA research for applied purpose in forever, I guess. Edie, final words over to you.
I'm handing it off to Courtney. I'm very grateful for you for hosting this today and letting us share with the world the framework. And yeah, thanks for helping facilitate too.
No problem. Really, thank you to you all for being the organizers, moderators, speakers to help make this event a success. And thank you to the audience for joining us today to participate in OA Week 2025. And we would encourage you to look at the GOA-ON OA Week website. You can use the QR code on the left to look at the other sessions that we have coming up this week. It is a full week. There is one more session for today, starting in 1 hour for the Caribbean Hub, if that is of interest. And there are 5 sessions happening tomorrow. So there is plenty to check out there. And if you would like to stay up to date with the GOA-ON community, we would encourage you to sign up to be a GOA-ON member using the QR code on the right, and that will allow you to join a regional hub or receive our quarterly newsletters to find out ways to be involved. And with that, I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will close and hope to see you next time. Thank you, everyone.